Hello, in this presentation we will generate and print a transaction report within QuickBooks Online. We will have a comprehensive QuickBooks Online course soon, if not available yet. We also have a comprehensive Excel course which complements the QuickBooks courses and a QuickBooks Pro desktop version course you can find at the link below. Here we are on the QuickBooks dashboard. We will be continuing with the Get Great Guitars problem. If you've been working along with us, that's great. If not, we will be generating a transaction list by date. It's going to be a very useful report, the transaction list by date. The transaction list by date is a less common report than we would see from, say, the financial statements, a balance sheet, an income statement, or a profit and loss. But it's a great report to really see the detail of a particular time period, to see if we have everything in there. And it's also great for grading to see if we are going along, if we're all on the same page in terms of what has been input, if we're going on the same information to input. So in order to get there, we're going to go to the reports. So we'll go to the reports tab on the left-hand side, and we will just type in the report. So we're going to be here to go to report, and we could scroll down and find it, but we're going to put the type in there, transaction list by date. So we want to get this by date, and we're going to select the transaction list by date. So here will be the report. We're going to change the dates as normal. And the first dates we're going to put in here are 12/31/20 to 12/31/20. So we're just going to put that one day. This is when most of the transactions that we have been inputting into our problem have been input. By limiting the dates as of this, then we can really narrow down to see if we have a date problem. A common problem to be is a date problem. So we want to see if everything is here in this particular day. We're going to run the report. And here is our information. So note what we have here is all this information as of 12/31, the end of the time period. We can see the transaction date, we can see the transaction type, and you might be saying, if you've been following along with this problem, like, we haven't done a lot of these types. We haven't entered an invoice, we haven't had a bill, we haven't had an official deposit type form. Where are these coming from? And these we'll see later, and we'll see that these are the driving forms that QuickBooks uses. So when we put in the opening balances, as in here, then QuickBooks used, in this case, an invoice for that opening balance transaction. As we work through this information, we'll see which transactions will be linked to which forms will be generated when QuickBooks has a certain transaction. Typically, we'll be using those forms to generate the transaction. But also, like here, there could be times when we enter data and QuickBooks assigns a form, the typical form used in order to create a typical transaction. So we have the number, the posting, the name, the memo, and the description. The account, this is going to be there's two accounts that are going to be affected here. And then the split, and that'll be another account, inventory asset in this case, and then the amount. So it's good here to just go through this and see if all the transactions that we have here line up to what we think we should have. Now, if anything is not on this transaction list and we think that it should, if we're working through this problem, we print this out and we don't have the same transaction list, then a good thing to do is to change these dates possibly a whole year back maybe. Just put this 2019 and then change the later date to 2021. And see if there's any of these dates that are different. Go through here and say, since this is the first month of operation, we shouldn't have any other dates here. So if I was to change this, let's actually do that. We will change this to 2019 and then change the end date to the 21st. And then I'm going to run this report again. We'll run it again, make sure to run it. And then when we scroll down here, if we see any dates that will be outside of these dates, that will be a common error, and we can then catch that and pick up any dates and then fix those. We could fix those within QuickBooks by just double-clicking on this or clicking one time on it, and that will take us to the particular form that we have. So in this case, we had an inventory starting date, and we could try to change the initial balance if we wanted to here. Inventory might be a little bit more difficult to change the balance, but here are all the inventory items we have. And then we have this invoice down here. We can do the same thing if we needed to change the date here. We can go to the invoice and click on that, drill down on that information, and here it is here. Again, you might be saying, hey, I didn't enter an invoice. because we haven't entered any invoices so far, but when we set up the customers, the system of QuickBooks then set up an invoice, that being the typical form used to set up the customer. So when we put those beginning balances in for Anderson Guitars, Anderson, Guitars, that's when this was set up. So I'm going to close this back out with this X here. Go back to the report. Same with the bills down here. If we wanted to change anything on the bill, we can drill down on the bill, check that out, and see what the bill was for. That, again, from when we put the vendor in place. We didn't actually enter a bill. We entered a vendor with a beginning balance and generated this information. We'll X out of that. Then we have the deposit. If we select the deposit, we see the $25,000. That then is the beginning balance. We didn't actually put a deposit in. We put the beginning balance in the checking account, and that was generated a deposit form through QuickBooks, closing that back out. Credit card expense, and then we have the journal entries typically used when QuickBooks doesn't have any other way to report something. So if there's no other form QuickBooks can use, it uses a journal entry. So here we set up a loan payable. There is no journal entry because that's not a typical transaction. So it's not something that happens on a day-to-day basis. So we just have to use the general journal or journal entry, and it puts the other side to the opening balance equity. So here we can actually see the two accounts. And for people that are using financial accounting or have learned financial accounting, this might be one of the most clear things we've seen so far, more clear than an invoice or a deposit form, because it actually shows both sides of the accounts. What it doesn't show, or what could be confusing, is it has debits and credits. That's the reason QuickBooks tries to avoid that for normal day-to-day data input usage, so that people don't need to know debits and credits. So we're going to close this back out. So once again, here are the balances. If we want to go through there and tick and tie these balances out, we're going to now go ahead and export this report to Excel. So we're going to scroll up top. We're going to select this item here, export, and we're going to select export to Excel. And that will open up Excel and complete the exporting process. Here we have our exported document. It looks pretty nice. We might want to format this one a little bit more because it looks like it might be big enough to not fit on one page. We also have some items down here that we can't quite see. In order to do that, we can go up to top. First, I'm going to make this cell a bit wider so we can see all the items here. We can do that by putting our cursor right between the J and the K, so it looks like that, not like that, but like that, not like that, but like that. And we'll just drag this a little bit lighter. Left click and drag to the right, and there we have that. Then I'm going to check to see if it prints on one page. One way to do that is to change from the view here down on the bottom, this is normal view, to page layout. So this second icon is called page layout view. And so I'm going to select the page layout view. And you'll note that it goes on two pages. If we select this third item, then we'll see the page break view. And we'll see that there's a drastic break right there. So if we go back to the first one, then I'm going to go back to the normal view. And then it puts this little dotted line. Basically, that's the page break. Now, this report won't look very good if we print it out like that, because it'd be okay if it was on 2 pages long, but it's not too good if you have this page and then you got this page next to it and you got to put them next to each other. So we probably want to do something. Couple things we can do. One, we could try to change this font from a portrait orientation to a landscape orientation. In order to do that, we can go to the Page Layout tab up top, Page Layout tab. And then we're going to go to the Page Setup group, and we're going to the Orientation. And we're in Portrait. We're going to change that to Landscape. So if we do that, it makes it a little bit better. So we're a little bit better here. Not quite there yet. Other things we could do, this first column, we may be able to just delete this first column. So I could put my cursor right on the A here. Just click on the A, right click, and actually, because this is a combined cell or a merged cell, that linking could be a problem. Let's try it one more time though. We'll put our cursor on A, right click down here somewhere, not up at the top, right click down here, and delete. See if it lets us do that. It does, but we deleted the whole title. So maybe that's not a good option. I'm going to undo that, go back up top and undo. Now the reason that's happening is because QuickBooks exported and linked the title all the way across, meaning it made this one cell all these cells. We could adjust that title. So this whole cell then is really named A1. when really it's going across this whole thing. We could have fixed that. We could, copy and paste the title and put it across B to J, and that might be something we would want to do. But there's other ways we can format this. We can also adjust just the size of the columns if we wanted to, and or we can kind of force this to work by going to the File tab up top, which is what we'll do now. And then we're going to go to the printing options. And within the printing options, we have a couple items here. We got to print the active sheet. That's what we want to do. Collection landscape orientation. This is the same orientation option we adjusted before. Letter size, margins. We could mess with the margins, but I'd rather not. And then we'll go to the scaling here. Scaling is what we're going to be adjusting. Let me move this up a bit so we can see it. We're going to go to scaling, and we want to fit to, so I adjusted this up a bit so we can see it. So we're going to go to the scaling options. Here, we've got no scaling, that's what the default is. Fit to one page. Now typically this would be okay if I do that, then it all fits on one page. That's pretty much what we want. But note that if it was a really long document, I don't really mind if it's a couple pages long. I just want it to be on one page wide. So note that if it was a longer document, you'd want to fit all columns to one page. And that would make sure, notice does the same thing here in that all the columns are on the same page and it was only one page long in the first place. But if it was multiple pages long, then we would rather have fit all columns to one page wide and let it go a couple pages long if it has to. Otherwise, it'll be way too small. So note that that does make it a lot smaller, the text, but that might be the best option. We're going to go back here. Other option, of course, is to delete some rows. For example, the posting row, we may not need it. The number row, we may not need it. If we delete those, we can make it a little bit nicer. We're going to go ahead and save this. We're going to go to the File tab. We're going to go to the Save As. We'll browse to the location we want to put this. I'm going to put it into the Excel Docs 6. I'm going to go ahead and keep the name again. You may want to adjust the name here, but I'll keep the name. We might just want the end part here. We may not need our name of the company. We might want to put a date, often useful, but I'm going to leave it as is and say save that. And there is the transaction list by date.